And we are now streaming live. Hi, Kathy. I saw that you joined.
Got Kathy coming on board.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. I'm trying to adjust my screen here.
So we'll give just another minute to have anybody else come in, but we have the attendees are here as well.
Good. We have just 3 more to go. Los Altos Hills. Oh, 2 more. Palo Alto. Lydia is in attendees, Phoebe.
We just moved her over.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Lydia.
Thank you.
Sure. So Palo Alto, so we're just waiting on Los Altos Hills.
So with that, Mary Lynn, it's 2 minutes after. Would you like to go ahead and get started?
Please, let's go ahead. Do the welcome and review of the July 28th SCSC Roundtable.
All right.
Evan?
Sounds good. Thank you, Chair Bernald. Welcome members and attendees to the July 28th, 2021 regular meeting of the SCSC Roundtable. Clearly, we are in a virtual meeting setting. We would like to note that this meeting will be conducted in accordance with the State of California Executive Order dated March 17th, 2020. All members of the committee will participate by video conference with no physical meeting location. We'd like to start by providing an introduction to the meeting format and ESA staff facilitating this virtual meeting. Myself, Evan Wasserman, Chris Jones, and Phoebe Wyman will be supporting this meeting. And this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the SCSC Roundtable website at scscroundtable.org a short time after the conclusion of the meeting. And it's also being streamed live on YouTube. I want to mention that on the first page of this agenda packet, all of these details are also provided. And note that we have included all correspondence received within the meeting agenda packet, and any additional correspondence received after the packet was compiled. A link has also been provided on the website for reference. As always, we're interested in hearing everyone's input and opinion on these topics, but in this setting, we would like to make sure that everybody is respectful and cognizant of some of the tools available to provide comment. For public comment, please use the raise hand function on the Zoom platform, and we will call on you to provide your comment. We are giving each member of the public 2 minutes to comment on topics today based on the content of this agenda. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mary Lynn for item number 3.
Thank you, Evan. I want to announce that Steve is on a well-deserved vacation right now, and this is why we are hearing from Evan today and from Chris Jones in Steve's place. I'm going to go ahead and do a call to order and identification of members present. When I call your name, would you please say present? Cupertino, Liang.
Present.
Thank you. Los Altos, Anita.
Present.
Thank you. Los Altos Hills, Stan. I'm not seeing him. Mountain View, Allison.
Present.
Thank you. Palo Alto, Lydia Koo in place of Greer.
Present.
Thank you. Santa Clara City, Kathy.
Here.
Santa Clara County, I did get a notification that Steve is not able to attend today. Saratoga, Mary Lynn, here, present, and Sunnyvale.
Liz Glenn attending.
Thank you. Present, attending, not an attendee.
I'm attending. I'm not present in the same place you are.
Good enough. Thank you very much. I also would like to get a good sense of who we have today. I know we have our attorney, Kirsten Powell. I see a nod.
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Do we have any members of the FAA present? If you are present, would you please let us know that you are and who you are? Not seeing anybody at this point. I'll move on. Do we have any representatives from SFO? Any representatives from San Jose Airport? Any members of Congress? Eric, congressional staff. I see Eric Henshaw. Is that you? You are here.
Yes, this is Eric Henshaw with Congresswoman Eshu's staff.
Thank
I
you.
also see Tom Pike.
Yes, yes, I'm going down the list. I see Tom Pike.
Thank
he
you,
has
yes.
raised his hand. Yes, thank you. Is there anyone else from any of the congressional offices? Okay. Anybody from the supervisor's offices? Yes. I see Christine Zanardi. Anyone else? Okay. And anyone from Cities Association? If you are, could you identify yourself? Okay, nobody there. All right. We then will move on to item number 3, which is our consent agenda. Normally, this is an item that we vote on and move on. I see a raised hand already on panelists. This has to do with the neighborhood environmental survey letter to the congressional offices. We're looking to authorize the chairperson with the full SCSC Roundtable approval to send a letter to the congressional representatives. Evan, did you have anything more that you wanted to present?
No, not at this time. I think this is for discussion and yeah.
And I see that Stanley Mock has joined us. So with the exception of Steve Preminger, we are all here. Stan, could you just say present for the record, please?
Present.
Thank you. All right. I have just basically said what we're hoping to do with this item today. We're hoping to send a letter to the congressional representatives, encouraging them to continue conveying roundtable positions on aircraft noise impacts and FAA noise research. I see Anita's hand and then I see Lydia's hand. Is there some discussion or a desire to pull the item?
I'll defer to Lydia.
Okay.
Yes, actually, thank you. I would like to pull the item number 3 from consent.
Okay. Is there a second? I don't think we have to have a second. I think
You don't have to. And I would like to take this, ask that we take this in order, Madam Chair, and not move it, but take it up and hopefully dispense with it in a fairly short period of time.
Absolutely. That's the way I prefer to run meetings too. So you have pulled the item. It's the only item. I don't see any attendees wishing to pull the item. So at this point, I'm going to look to you, Lydia, to explain why you would like to have the item pulled, and then we can have public discussion after that.
Thank you. In the letter, and first I just want to say thank you so much for wanting to send a letter to the congressionals in terms of reviewing this noise threshold. But also in the letter itself, it mentions that in the NES survey, even at the 47 dB, it is intrusive and annoying and harmful, right? Impactful to the constituents and to the people in general. Yet we have recommend in this letter, it recommends a reduction to 50. And so I am just kind of perplexed by that, a little bit confused by that, since even at the 47, it is still harmful. Then further, to go a little bit further also, and I hope my colleagues can also contribute, that perhaps it would be better for a agency that has background in this in order to do the recommendation. I think members of the public did send in a letter to the roundtable with some suggestions. And I apologize, I just jumped on to be a alternate backup yesterday, and so I didn't have a full time to review it, and I'm actually out of town. So I just wanted to bring that back to the letter that the members of the public have submitted. But mostly it's perplexing to me why it's at 47 when 47 is harmful and we're recommending a 50. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff before we move on to public comment? Seeing no one raise their hand, I see Jennifer and then Darlene Yapley who would like to speak. I'd like to remind everyone that given the load on the agenda that we are, and then Robert Holbrook, that we are asking that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. In response, before I do talk, I do call up the 3 that so far that are from the public that wish to speak. The draft that the ad hoc put together was based on public comment at past meetings. It was based on the letter that was received that was created by 6 cities, I believe it is, that they actually wrote a letter regarding this topic. And it was based on information that we had received in 2 communications from, I believe, Darlene Yapley and Marie Jo Fremont. So I want to assure people that this wasn't, those 3 sources or 4 sources were combined with what our consultant suggested. So this is not just something that's been produced out of our office. So if we can key up the timer, I will call on Jennifer.
Hi, thank you. I think it's really important to know where 47 comes from. It comes from an assumption that 12.3% of the population is annoyed, and therefore that insulation should apply to this percentage. And it's a very risky approach to use that assumption, because those are assumptions made 50 years ago for a very different topic. I would suggest, now 50 happens to be the substantiated level of how far, if you're going to use annoyance, the NES study has revealed. Annoyance doesn't actually account for health. So the third option you would have is to use the metrics used by the World Health Organization and use their levels. You really have a choice, but I think it's more urgent than anything to reduce. Harm from noise can come as low as 45 and below. We're never going to hit that mark, but you should be very cautious about what assumptions you're using to provide a number. And it actually doesn't take, a lot of committees. There's only one indication for health harm, which comes from the World Health Organization. You're not going to find that for other metrics, which is why it's a standard for a global metric. So I do want to thank everybody, though, for providing this input, because you are our standard bearers for the fallacy of the 65 DNL. And so, quite frankly, we've got to start moving on this, and we're not, it's going to be very debated to actually change that, but you have the opportunity to change the way the National Environmental Protection Act is working for people. It's not working right now, but before you put all of these theories forward, use the right numbers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Darlene Yapley.
Thank you for your continued efforts to remedy the adverse aviation impacts. Here are key points of the email we sent the roundtable on the NES draft on Monday. The top recommendation should be number 2, adopt and use alternative metrics and thresholds, not change the DNL threshold. DNL is the wrong metric for NextGen. It vastly underrepresents the frequent and highly concentrated overflights. NextGen impacts will not be addressed if the FAA does not adopt alternative metrics for evaluation and decision-making. As tempting as it may be, please do not specify a DNL threshold. Instead, ask Congress to direct the FAA to task the national academies to recommend metrics and thresholds based on existing information. The FAA uses DNL for two purposes: environmental reviews and sound insulation programs. These must be dealt with separately. The draft combines them. Please correctly state the congressional requirement. ASNA language 1979 refers to a single system. The FAA misinterpreted the congressional directive. The congressional requirement is for a single system, not a single metric, which is what is in your draft letter. In terms of funding requests, yes, Congress should fund the highest priority to adopt and use alternative metrics. However, Part 150 or soundproofing, the cash outlays must be understood to make credible funding requests. At 50 DNL funds would be needed from San Francisco to Palo Alto and beyond, and would be the same nationwide. On the timeline recommendation, please change the wording because alternative metrics to better evaluate noise will not fix the problem. We want them for analysis, of course, but we also need the FAA to use them for decision-making and be required to remedy significant noise impacts. Finally, please ask the FAA in your closing to make the NES data available as they promised to do in the NES report. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Next up is Robert Holbrook.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the Roundtable for its support of the community with the draft of the letter that it is that we're reviewing. My concern with the letter is, ironically, that in asking as much as as appears to be requested here, the letter could be dismissed out of hand by people who have a better understanding of what the consequences of this might be. It's unclear to me whether or not the letter is advocating a hard requirement of 50 DNL. And if that's the case, I think it could profoundly disrupt air travel in the country. And if that's the case, I don't think we're going to get it. So it seems to me that the consequences of such a broad and specific recommendation should be considered and discussed by the Roundtable. If, on the other hand, the suggestion is that above 50 DNL, environmental analyses other than CADEX would be required, with the expectation that the FAA would make the best efforts it has available to it to mitigate noise as close to 50 DNL as possible, understanding that statements of overriding consideration might be quite common, then the recommendation, I think, becomes more credible. But it's hard for me reading the document as written to be clear what's being asked. I'd also like to second the point that Darlene just mentioned with respect to sound insulation. Part 150 studies are used for determining sound insulation, but that recommendation combined with recommendation 3 to fully fund recommendation 1 could lead to a very large expenditure. If 2 million houses would be affected, and that would be 50,000 houses at each of 40 of the largest airports, that could cost upwards of $100 billion. And it would be important to understand that number before we put this letter through, if that's the intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I don't see anyone else who has not spoken raising their hands. And still don't see any hands raised. So I'll move back to the Roundtable. And I'm going to look to Chris Jones to comment on what he's heard today from our speakers. I don't, if you've taken notes or if there's some certain things that have been hit, the DNL 50 dB in place of the 65. First of all, I appreciate what I believe it was Darlene said about flipping the order, but so that we can stay on track with what we have in front of us, if we could just suspend that idea for a while, I would be appreciative, because then we can speak to what we have in front of us. It'll be more efficient, I believe. So I'm interested about the National Academy. I'm interested about the going to 50 DNL 50 dB. And I think there's been a good point raised about how we limit the funding so that we don't break everybody's bank.
I think the recommendation for, and this is just my opinion, for congressional mandate to explore this option with the National Academies of Sciences is probably a good recommendation that should be added to the existing letter. For now, focusing on changing the DNL threshold is probably the most productive course of action. I think that the Jennifer Landisman in her comments had explained to Lydia why the 50 was chosen over the 47. The 47 itself represents basically what the equivalent of what 65 was back in the early 80s in terms of level of annoyance. So that's why that metric has been, or that decibel level has been singled out. Is there anything specific that you wanted answers to?
I think I'll let the rest of our membership ask questions, and then maybe we can go to actually looking at the letter and seeing where we might want to make some recommendations, if that's agreed to by the roundtable. So on my screen, I see Glenn, and then I see Allison. Glenn,
Thanks. Thanks. I think that letters to the congressional office are important, but I think we need to be careful that we don't spend too much time overly wordsmithing what we're trying to get down here. I think we should go ahead and ask somebody like Tom Pike or something and go, here, if these are the concepts of what we want to try and get in front of the congressional members, what's the best way to go ahead and communicate that? I'm actually not worried that our words are not going to do a budgetary change and cause hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars of work to be done. That still has to go all through Congress. What we're really trying to do with these letters is just highlight to the Congress members, here, these are topics we need to make sure you guys are carrying the torch for. And, so I just think we need to be overly careful that we're not trying to wordsmith too much that's going to delay being able to get the letters in front of the Congress members. So to me, these are broad concepts. If whoever wrote the letter, if they want to go ahead and make some adjustments to this, and like I said, I would reach out to somebody in one of the congressional offices and go, here, what's the kind of words that are going to be more impactful to Mr. and Mrs. Congressman, rather than what we think are the most impactful words we should say to them.
Thank you. Anything else, Glenn? Okay, Allison, and then I see your hand up, Lydia, and then I see Kathy Watanabe.
So I generally agree with that we don't want to wordsmith too much and that reaching out to the congressional office might be a good idea. I also was impressed with several things that Darlene Yapley said about, I believe and I didn't take very careful notes, but I think if I got it right, she was saying maybe we don't have to cite a specific DNL, and I would refer to her words. She had, if I got it right, a particular way of maybe talking about impacts rather than a particular metric. And I don't know if that would be more effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Chris, can you answer that? I'm concerned that without some portion of the existing system of metrics that the FAA is using, that we might enter paralysis on behalf of the FAA.
I think the best approach would be to treat a lowering of the significance threshold to 50 dB as maybe an interim step while further exploration is done about the best approach to evaluating noise impacts is conducted by the FAA.
So this will be an ongoing conversation with our congressionals, is what we're saying we would hope it to be. And
yes.
Them with FAA. Okay. Lydia?
So thank you for that. So if I understand that correctly, is that first reduce the threshold to the 50 and then continue conversation and continuing the lowering of it by engaging with perhaps the academies in order to evaluate that. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Okay, so that's great. Now, I just wanted to also mention that, you know, I agree with Councilmember Hendricks that, you know, we don't want to wordsmith and take forever. We want this letter to go out as soon as possible. At the same time, you know, I think that it's pretty important to ensure that the words are right, the wording is correct. For example, alternative metrics, right? Right now, in the letter itself, it's only for better analysis. We want to ensure that it is going to also address evaluation and decision making as well. I go back to the example of pirate, you know, where it ends up, you know, pirate, look into it for height until ARG. And then before you know it, what happens with ARG to sit by and then to the airport? That hasn't been addressed. And that was the wrong way to do it because it's still impactful. I mean, most of pirate was over the ocean. So I want to make sure that the wording does not get misconstrued or misused. Misconstrued, not, I apologize for saying misused, but misconstrued. And then some other method is developed and we're left holding the bag on a bad decision or a decision that is continuously impactful. So those are, I just wanted to clarify that. And also at this point, I also want to mention that Palo Alto has 52 CNEL. So 50 would not improve much. And that's because we're going to need alternative metrics, you know. So I don't see how that helps many of us around Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, Los Altos, Mountain View, etc. So those are my comments, and I hope that, you know, that will help with development of the letter.
Okay, if you all will agree, I'm going to call on Kathy because I see her hand raised, and then I think it's important for us to get to the letter and begin to think about what concepts we can recommend and agree on today.
Thank you, Mary Lynn, and I appreciate the comments. I know a lot of work has gone into getting to this point, and I'm hoping my dog doesn't bark, but I just wanted to just echo, you know, what Glenn stated. I agree with Glenn's points, and also that we don't want to lose the momentum that we have created. I mean, it's taken a long time to get to this point. We've had the NES letter, you know, information available to us for over 6 months now, and we now have the opportunity to come together and put something forward. I think this is a great starting point. We've taken all of the recommendations and the considerations and important information that everybody has submitted to put this together. But I agree. I think it's a good opportunity to take a look at the letter and see where we can make some changes so we can get this forwarded. And also use this as a base to continue the discussion. It is an important discussion, but I think this helps level the playing field so that we can have a good conversation going forward. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mary Lynn.
Thank you, Kathy. I think we are going to have a very good conversation going forward because if any of you have noticed in chat, additionally to having Tom Pike here, we have Representative Khanna. Welcome today. Thank you for being here. So Evan, can you bring up the letter that's the latest edition? And then there was a backup letter that where the subcommittee had suggested a couple of other changes that I think have been reflected today. I don't know that we're ready for that one, but I think if we could work with the latest draft. And I also want to thank Anita and Kathy for working with me on drafting this, along with Steve. And we can't quite read it at that point, or at least I can't. Is there any way to enlarge it? How does that work for everybody? Do we need a little bit bigger?
And just for reference, this is on page 13 of the agenda packet. People leaving along at home.
So, Madam Chair, can I just ask a question? In the interest of time with our long agenda, can we just appoint one or two people to work offline to go ahead and take all the comments that have been done here and put in? I just fear we're not going to be able to get anywhere close to our agenda today if we try and write this letter right here.
I appreciate that, Glenn. There's a couple of things that have me concerned. I want to make sure that we have registered a sense of consensus.
If you want to do it that way, that's fine. I
Well,
don't want to take
is
more
that
time discussing.
Part of
Okay.
the recommendation is that the chair approve this later on, and the chair is up for election later on. So there's no sure thing here today. So I would like to get to consensus, and I'm hoping we can do that among ourselves very quickly. So if we do not go just for comparing, because we have this letter up right now, and we do not do anything about talking about whether we switch recommendations 1 and 2. Under the number 1, reduce the threshold. I'm going to go item by item on this one, not to try and sway anybody one way or another, but from what you have heard today, committee members, are you comfortable so that we do not create any kind of paralysis? And we do understand that this is an ongoing conversation with our congressional offices. And this is where the letter is focused, in sending this to the congressionals, not directly to the FAA. So not getting too deep into the weeds on this, that for the sake of being able to move forward and being productive, that we keep the second paragraph, which says we recommend Congress immediately establish the 50 DNL-dB as the aircraft noise impact threshold. I guess I'll roll call if that's okay. Cupertino. Liang.
Yeah.
Los Altos, Anita.
Do you mean to stop with NEPA, or do you want to include Part 150 in your question?
I just want the DNL-dB, period, 50.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with 50 or going to 47 if we're just talking NEPA.
Okay. Stan, Los Altos Hills.
50 is fine to start.
Thank you. Mountain View, Allison.
Yes.
Okay. Palo Alto, Lydia.
Yes, with the understanding it's still going to be explored for the lowering.
Yes, yes. Kathy, Santa Clara.
Yes.
Me, yes. And Sunnyvale, Glenn, yes. Yes.
I'd say yes, and not to add a complication, you might just say a minimum of 50.
Okay. Lovely having you at the end of the conversation to add that. Okay, so we can move on with that. The next part is, and I've got to find my red letter thing.
Well, I think we have to address whether we want to talk about Part 150 before you move on. Part
Chris,
150.
could you inform us on Part 150 while I pull my paperwork up?
Well, in the recommendation in the second paragraph of number 1, it does say establishing DNL 50 dB threshold for NEPA and Part 150. And the reason I asked the question was whether you wanted to keep that there or not. And if we're going to strike the Part 150 noise analysis, which to me, that's another question we have to face. Because if we're going to strike that because of the impact on the mitigation cost, et cetera, that's been raised, then I think we have to decide, we just cross out everything about Part 150.
Chris, could you speak to that?
So right now we evaluate noise impacts, not we, but the FAA evaluates noise impacts under National Environmental Protection Act. And in response to the ASNA, which is the Aviation Safety and Noise Abatement Act that was passed in 1979, the FAA promulgated 14 CFR Part 150, which establishes a Part 150 program, which is a voluntary program that airports use to identify noise impacted uses, residential uses primarily in areas around the airports. And this information is used to determine whether noise insulation is necessary for some of the residences located in these areas. DNL 65 is the threshold that's used to identify an incompatible residential land use under both Part 150 and under NEPA.
So how do we work around the fact that we don't want to break anyone's bank here? We don't want to be addressing sound insulation, the funding of what would create sound insulation and nothing.
Good question that warrants further discussion and evaluation. It would require some reworking of the regulation.
What about our letter?
I think to start, probably it would be easiest to go for NEPA, and then further discussion is warranted as addressed in Part 150.
Okay, can we strike the 150 section then and still have a solid document?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, okay, good. I think that's getting to what we've heard. Next, Anita, I'm still looking for my paperwork. Do you want to carry on?
All right, all right. I think we also ought to consider the point made that in item 1, that this should be used not just for analysis, but for evaluation and decision making. And I'd favor changing or adding that wording.
Would you state that again so we all understand?
So the point that was made, I think, by both Lydia and by a couple of our public speakers, was that analysis, just saying it should be used for analysis, is not sufficient. That lowered, if we use a lowered DNL, that it should also be used for evaluation and decision making. And I think those are important points that should be added to item 1.
Okay. Chris, comment?
And potentially changing the concept, the use of the word mitigation measures, which is in the last line of item 1, as we see here, that it's not just mitigation in the sense of with the ambiguity of mitigation under Part 150. That we're really going to be focused. I think where we're headed is that paragraph 1 becomes focused on the use of a lower DNL in the near term for NEPA purposes, for analysis, evaluation, decision making, and actions to ameliorate noise impacts.
The utilization, basically, if you were to drop the significance threshold from 65 to 50, that would be the threshold that would be used for decision-making purposes under NEPA. Mitigation would be the correct term for NEPA, a noise abatement for Part 150. So a bright line could be drawn between the two.
Okay. Go ahead, Anita, please.
Well, from what Chris is saying, if we're going to drop the Part 150 stuff, then Section 1 should be okay, but maybe we need to look at what we're doing in Section 2.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised at this time. All right, so Section 2. Are we clear so far, Evan, on where we're going with Section 1?
Yes, we're making notes. And
okay, good. Section 2. Anita, any comments?
Oh, I thought you'd go to our other colleagues. Lydia has her hand raised.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see it.
Sorry.
It's hard with the screen sharing. Go ahead, Lydia.
Yeah, thank you. So I think this is the section 2, that has in its 3rd paragraph, and then conduct additional analysis using alternative noise metrics. I think in this section, it is where just to use the word metrics might not be the complete use. It should perhaps be a system of metrics.
That's something that I actually had sent to ESA. Chris, can you comment on that? I felt it was a good idea.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Where there's paragraph 1, it's the 2nd line. It has to do with significant impacts is inadequate and does not meet the congressional requirement for a metric that provides a highly reliable relationship. Could we strike metric and put in, I think you wanted, Lydia, a system of metrics?
I think there was single system because that's the language that's actually in the act.
Mm-hmm.
I would rely upon the regulations promulgated by the agency in response to the act. So I would keep it as metric, which is a term that's currently used.
And I think the point that the public and that those of us who are discussing this were trying to make is that the agency in interpreting the act took language that's in the act as a quote single system and transformed that into single metric, and single metric isn't good enough. We need a system. I understand that the congressional intent is likely a single system, meaning a uniform system, so that you don't have, you know, different things that happening in different places. But the idea of a single system as being the original language of the act, and asking the FAA to look at their regulations and come back to what I believe was the original congressional intent is what we ought to be calling for here. And
Right.
I'd be interested if Mr. Pike has or Mr. Khanna have any comment on that at all. You know, what we want to do, what's effective here, and we want to know, what do we need to put in the hands of our congressional representatives that they can rely on as they work with their colleagues?
I see one hand raised. I'm trying to find it. Tom is on.
Hi, this is Tom. And by the way, Congressman Khanna is not on. I just put, you know, Tom Pike with Rep. Khanna's office, and excuse me.
Oh.
I think that, you know, basically, as long as we have the letter, and then we can also verbally, you know, supplement the nuances that are expressed by the roundtable, you know, we can get around that in terms of, you know, like you said, you don't want to spend all of today fine tuning with the exact maybe points on the letter. But you know, I've corresponded. I think Glenn has been a very good advocate in terms of let's, you know, just try to break the standard protocol and see how we actually can get through to the FAA. I am in touch with our DC office to try to, you know, find alternative means of doing that, you know, other than this Quiet Skies Caucus going directly to the FAA director, what other means we can do it. I'm entirely on board to try to find something creative, because I don't, you know, I don't see that a lot has been done, you know, in the last couple of years in terms of getting a response from the FAA. So the point is, I think as long as we have the letter as the basis, we can push forward on all fronts, and of course in conjunction with the other congressional offices, at least one of whom is on today. I don't know if you had any more specific guidance other than that, but that's what I was thinking of.
Well, I really appreciate hearing that, Tom. Thank you very much. If we can get some consensus that we're going in the right direction, but that we need to revise this letter after the meeting and the chair sign it, will you be comfortable with that procedure? Because I know you were not comfortable in the past with something passing through without full roundtable approval.
Well, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of all the other offices. I would say that, you know, if there's a couple of, if the roundtable has expressed parameters within which something should be defined, and then that is done, then to me that would be acceptable. It's just, you don't want to just entirely defer, say, okay, well, you go off and figure out the details and then come back with something that certain roundtable members will disagree with. So as long as, I would say, as long as there are, you know, again, set parameters for phrasing, here are the stated goals that the roundtable has set forth, please implement that. I would look at that as, to me, that would be appropriate approval.
Thank you. So to try and, I see Lydia's hand. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I would like to support what Vice Chair Inander has mentioned about the systems and how the Aviation Safety and Noise Abatement Act, in the language, it actually states it's a system. So we want to be very clear to the FAA that they need to evaluate it based on a system, because at this, you know, we don't want them misinterpreting it. Yeah, inadvertently.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
so
Madam
that's,
Chair,
Yeah, Anita.
so Madam Chair, what I'd like to suggest is that in the first paragraph, we do change in the second line, we do change that metric to system. And then in the third paragraph that we make change, which you took note of from Ms. Yapley's letter, which suggested a change to the end of that paragraph so that it would read following the bracket where time above and number above occurs, would read to assess any significant noise increases and identify mitigation and abatement measures to remedy impacts when they exceed significant levels as defined by the system of metrics and thresholds.
Chris, are we okay with that?
Yes.
That won't slow us down. Good.
No.
Okay. Then moving on to number
You might want to check for
2.
concurrence with my suggestion. Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Okay. Then I'll do roll call. Cupertino, Liang,
Yes.
Los Altos, Anita,
Yes.
Los Altos Hills, Stan,
Yes.
Mountain View, Allison.
Yes, that's good.
Good. Palo Alto, Lydia,
yes, thank you.
Kathy, Santa Clara,
Yes.
Glenn,
Yes.
Sunnyvale, and me, yes. So good. Are we ready to move on to number 3 then? I think we've got the gist of it.
Before we move on, I would like to make a point of clarification
Yes.
about the relationship between because I'm afraid I may have misspoke. NEPA is reliant upon the noise thresholds established in Part 150. So severing the two or drawing a clear line between them would require an establishment of metrics separate for NEPA instead of relying solely on the Part 150. So that's just a point I wanted to raise because I don't think I got that across.
So when
Not sever, draw a bright line.
Sure. So is there a way to add a paragraph that explains what we're trying to get at, that we are not going to be speaking to sound insulation remedies?
Yes, and I think, I don't know if I would add it to the first paragraph. You might want to add it to the discussion about mitigation and noise abatement.
Yes, good. Kathy, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure, did we need to take a vote or just get a consensus on paragraph number 2? Because it seemed like we did that with number 1. I just want to make sure we're following this.
That's what Marilyn was in the middle of.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think she got halfway through.
Yeah. So we're still on 2, but I thought we have agreed to change the last sentence that was identify any reportable noise increases and replace that with assess any significant noises. And that takes us to the end of that paragraph, number 2. Are we on the same page now at number 3? Good, I see a head nod. Fully fund the recommendations.
Before we go there, I'm sorry, I wanted to make another point. In Order 1051F, which is FAA's implementing regulations for NEPA, there is provisions for the preparation of supplemental noise analyses on a case-by-case basis.
So how will that be reflected in the letter?
I think perhaps evaluating the language used to determine if maybe it could be something that's a little more formalized than on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you for that catch, Chris. All right, item number 3, develop a timeline.
No, funding is.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I highlighted something, caught my eye. I'm into squirrels these days. I gotta focus here. fully fund the recommendations. I think we're speaking already to that. We've got the sense that we want to separate the funding to carry through this policy, or whatever we want to call it, a system where we discuss noise separated from, again, noise insulation. But I think we definitely have to acknowledge somewhere in here with limiting the funding request. Chris, what are there any recommended changes that you would suggest here?
Just clarification about the difference between the mitigation and the noise abatement.
Okay, so we're heard there. Are we okay then on number 3, everybody? Cupertino,
Yes.
Los Altos, Anita.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay, Mountain View, Los Altos Hills,
Yes.
Mountain View,
Yes.
Palo Alto. Lydia?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Santa Clara, Kathy?
Yes.
Sunnyvale?
Yes.
Good, and me, yes, good. Okay, moving on to number 4, develop a timeline. The one thing that was suggested as a potential change in the first paragraph was, instead of implementing a policy, was to implement a system. But aside from that, in that paragraph, I didn't see any changes. What's the difference between a policy and a system, Chris?
I'm not sure in this context what the intent was. Where are we?
Oh, so we're on number 4, paragraph 1.
Do we mention system in the letter, or are we just referring to the policy?
But we're talking about a system of metrics is what the paragraph, the suggested wording change is. And so, yeah, a policy, it says what you're going to do. A system of metrics says what that really should be. And
I would say the system of metrics would fall under the umbrella of policy in this context.
Yeah, I just don't want, I just think we need to call it out. Every place we get a chance, we need to call out the need for the use of other metrics. And this is a chance to do that.
So what are you suggesting, Anita?
I thought that the suggested changes that came in from Ms. Yapley's letter were fine.
So switch to system.
So that following in the 3rd line of that letter, where it says DNL 50 to 65, comma, implementing a system that uses alternative metrics to assess any significant noise increases and to require the FAA to reduce noise levels when impacts are significant, and then go on and developing a new framework system to comply with ANSA.
Good. Glenn, I know we're wordsmithing.
Yeah, since we're down at this level, where we say develop a timeline, can we say develop a publicly reportable timeline?
Oh,
Yes.
yes, good catch. Okay, then moving on to the 2nd paragraph. I have a problem with this because with including a suggested recommendation. This is to the congressionals, and I would like it to be a positive message. Anita?
Yeah, I agree. It needs to be a positive message, but I think if we can ask Mr. Pike to indulge a few more words about this. I think one of the things that hamstrings us a little bit in what we're trying to do here is because we do not have the raw data. And the raw data were promised, they were supposed to be out. And if we're going to engage in being helpful to the congressional representatives about the really great information that I'm sure comes out of this study, we have to have the data and look at the data as it applied to our communities, and we don't have access to that right now. And so I'm hoping that if there is some sort of holdup, that our congressional people can knock through that that wall and get the data to us as soon as possible.
I see Tom Pike's hand raised.
And this is Tom. And I mean, I think we can definitely have, we can have ex parte communications from our representatives on the roundtable saying, hey, congressional representatives, what about this? We need the data in order to do that. And then we can, go from there, as opposed to having the full roundtable, which is expressing really more the themes. So I understand that. And I've, in our district, we have Cupertino, Santa Clara, and Sunnyvale. And so if those representatives, come to our office saying, hey, we need that in order to do our job on the roundtable, then, I think we can, we can certainly do that. But you need to have, obviously you need to have what's in the letter needs to be agreed upon by everybody, and you don't want it to be held up. So hopefully I answered the question.
I think so. Thank you. And then it'll encourage the rest of us to go to other congressional offices. I saw your smile. Anita, I saw your hand raised first. Lydia's went up, went back down. So I'll call on you, Anita.
No, I didn't mean to have my hand up. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So are we ready to move on with the changes that have been discussed here for develop a publicly reportable timeline? Is that where you want that, Glenn? Yeah. And then move with the idea of the language that Anita included that have to do with implementing a system or policy, and we'll discuss that later on, to use alternate metrics to assess any significant noise increase. With that request, Chris, does that slow down the process at all?
Unmute myself. I don't believe so.
Okay, good. So then I'm going to go through very quickly again, roll call for item number 4 for approval for what we have presented. Cupertino?
Yes.
Los Altos?
Yes.
Los Altos Hills?
Yes.
Mountain View?
Yes.
Palo Alto?
Yes.
Santa Clara?
Yes.
Sunnyvale?
Yes.
And Saratoga? Yes. Good. Now, do we need anything at the very bottom to speak to as a summary, Chris? That are you recommending, or Anita recommending that we put anything at the bottom that we have not put in the 4 recommendations? Lydia's hands up.
Actually, I would like to ask if Mr. Jones could give a little bit more clarification about what he means when he talks about supplemental noise.
Supplemental noise metrics. So if you, for example, identify significant noise impacts in an area of noise sensitive land uses, you can undertake a supplemental noise analysis using different metrics. 2 of the metrics we identified in the letter being time above, number above, but there are other metrics that can be used to identify the effects of noise on these land uses.
So does the supplemental analysis have any bearing on decision making?
It can. It depends upon the context. And so one option might be for the FAA to beef up its regulatory language in 1051F to account for that. It's something that would warrant maybe further discussion.
Okay. Okay. I think I understand it.
For example, when you're looking at areas of natural quiet being a term of art in national parks or other resources that fall under the Section 4F of the Department of Transportation Act of 1966, you would probably undertake a supplemental noise analysis to identify potential impacts to the noise environment.
So that's actually a good thing.
Yeah. but it's also something that can be employed for residential uses, not just areas within national parks.
So I'm sorry for all the noise in the background, but very quickly, decision making, when what we're asking for is decision making, it doesn't use the term supplemental, right? Again, wording is kind of important here. So using the word supplemental, should it be in our recommendation at all?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. It's optional. Again, it depends upon the context. In terms of supplemental, I think the context here is, okay, we're looking at 50 dB as the threshold of significance for your standard noise analysis. Supplemental being these would be additional analyses that would be conducted. Here in this context, we're looking at environments where low levels of noise during daytime and nighttime are an aspect of the setting. So it's not something that you would employ to like an entire study area, but it would be individualized analyses depending upon the type of land use and the context of the environment. Does that make sense?
It does. It still does it confusing when the word supplemental is used over here. So maybe perhaps we should consider not using the word in this letter, supplemental.
Anita, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Lydia, because I think what we're trying to move toward is a system of metrics that can be routinely used, broader than DNL, and that would be required in the kind of situation that we have on the peninsula. My concern with using supplemental is that it becomes, quote, an optional. And we want to move to where this isn't optional. This is a routine part of the system of analysis that happens. We're not the special case of, Yosemite, where I don't think that trying to put us in that same box is going to serve us well.
Well, I just use that as for example.
I realize that that's an example, but you understand my point, which is I want to get where this is a
analyses that are conducted
a system and not an optional, quote, supplemental. Supplemental gets used as optional, and we want to kind of move away from that, I think, but that's my opinion.
Does it give us any advantage, given our area, of actually saying, okay, we're going to be using a series of different metrics that actually will prove that whatever the DNL that the FAA is using is not is too high and has an impact on our constituents? Chris, that was for you. If we did keep that in there.
I think using a word beyond supplemental, a more definitive word would be fine.
Okay, are we good with that then? I see Lydia nodding. Thank you.
Thank you. As long as the word is not used, Anita,
okay.
Thank you.
Do we need a further vote to move ahead with the recommended action here today, which was to authorize the chairperson with full SCSC Roundtable approval to send a letter to the congressional representatives encouraging them to continue conveying roundtable positions on aircraft noise impacts and FAA noise research?
Madam Chair, I think we have one more big picture thing to consider, and that is the primary thrust of this letter going to be to lead with a recommendation to reduce DNL, or is the primary thrust of the letter going to be to lead with, okay, we know DNL is not working, so let's put our efforts toward a new system of metrics? It goes to the, should we basically flip 2 and 1 or not? And I think we ought to take a sense of the roundtable on that one.
Okay. Chris, do you have any input on that before I ask for input?
I think, again, going back to what I had initially said when we first started this discussion, is that perhaps taking a more iterative approach and would be the best way to move forward, and starting off with a request to lowering the DNL threshold and then moving forward with the development of other metrics, or the metrics are there, but developing the policies necessary to use those metrics as a system of metrics, which would include, I think, the recommendation for Congress to mandate study on the part of the National Academy of Sciences to explore this option. There are a variety of ways we could go with this.
Anita, any thoughts? I see you're pondering that. So the thrust is double. It's for both. And I know we have constituents that feel that we need to emphasize a new system, but we also know that the FAA is slow to respond and that this is going to be an ongoing conversation. Any thoughts, Anita? And then I'll call.
I thought you were gonna go around to the group.
Okay. I will go around to the group then. I see your hand, Stan, but I'll come to you as I've been calling roll call, if that's okay. Cupertino, switch 1 to 2 or 2 to 1, or leave it as is.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're not sure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anita.
I think I'm going to take Chris's recommendation here. I think that plus Mr. Pike's comments about our continuing engagement, that we're okay leaving it as it is.
Okay. Stan.
We have to start somewhere, and this is where we start. This is everything is not constant here. It's changing. So there will be other letters in addition to this, but we have to start somewhere. And I believe 1 is a good place to start, because that standard has been around for a million years. And for them to change that standard is going to be quite massive in the first place. For them to get other noise metrics on board is going to be even more difficult to do. So let's just stay with 1. And I think that would be good. The funding models for abatement and for actually noise reduction, I don't know that we can get anywhere there, because it's going to be really expensive and there's going to be a lot of objections. I just wanted to point out that the FAA had people who were in the industry, in the airlines, and what's going to mean to them is a lot of money. So there's going to be a lot more against us if we use the 150, Part 150 noise analysis.
Good point. Thank you. Allison, Mountain View.
So I really like the idea of the system of metrics and was thinking of leading with that, but I'm also convinced by the idea of moving iteratively. So I would say keep them in the same order.
Thank you. Kathy, Santa Clara.
Yes, I agree. Based on listening to Chris's input, it just seems like one will bring about the other, and I believe leaving it 1 and 2 where they are right now will achieve that goal. So I'm all for leaving it the way it is right now.
And Sunnyvale. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't. It's fine.
Okay, and I agree with keeping it in the order and continuing the conversation for as long as it takes to produce a good result. All right, then I believe we have direction.
Madam Chair, do you want,
so
this was a consent item, I think we need a formal action.
We do need a formal action.
So I will move that we task the chair to finalize this letter based on today's input and to send it to our congressional representatives.
Do I have a second? Oh, thank you, Kathy. Kathy Watanabe seconding. All right, again, roll call. Liang Cupertino.
Yes.
Anita Los Altos.
Yes.
Stan Los Altos Hills.
Yes.
Allison Mountain View.
Yes.
Lydia Palo Alto.
Yes.
Kathy Santa Clara.
Yes.
Glenn Sunnyvale.
Yes.
And I vote yes too. Thank you very much. We move on now to item number 4.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a quick question before we go on?
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand my afternoon. Is there a time certain end to this meeting today?
The next 3 items are ones that I'm presenting, and I'm keeping them very short. We are aiming at ending at 4 p.m. as
Okay,
scheduled.
that's fine.
Okay. I can't account for the attendees and what they may say during the chair's report or oral communication, but we're aiming for 4 o'clock, and that's why we're limiting the amount of time that public can speak. So the next item is item number 4, the FAA advisory circular on airport compatible land use. This is Chris Jones presenting. The motion is to authorize the chairperson with full SCSC Roundtable approval to prepare and send a comment letter to the FAA based on feedback from the Roundtable today regarding the draft advisory circular prior to the August 6th, 2021 comment period. So that means that we will have to get all our comments in before the 4th of August. And Chris, please take it away.
So this is an advisory circular. It's advisory only. It's not regulatory. The FAA has no local land use jurisdiction, so it can't make regulations for local land uses. However, it can require airports to ensure compatible land uses are developed around the airports as part of their grant guarantees when they participate in federal funding for airport projects. So the purpose of this circular is to provide guidance to airport staff, to local land use jurisdictions, and to other stakeholders on the process of developing compatible land uses around airports, and of course on the opposite, preventing incompatible land uses around the airports. So it basically is focused on the incompatible land uses, preventing those, as well as maintaining safety and utility for airport operations. It identifies several compatible land use development tools and resources for protecting communities. I took some notes here, so I'm kind of reading through them. Identifies the various roles and responsibilities for the different stakeholders, both federal, state, and local agencies in terms of land use compatibility planning. It identifies compatible and incompatible types of land use categories and areas around the airports. It provides for coordination, gives guidance on coordination between airports, local land use agencies, and provides tools and techniques for developing compatible land uses. The focus is on noise, airspace, wildlife, and other kinds of hazards, such as electrical interference with aircraft navigational systems, which are the primary domains that the FAA is concerned with. And so for example, in Chapter 2, does explain the differences between the different kinds of airspace surfaces. So it goes into some explanation of what Part 77 imaginary airspace surfaces are, which if you've seen diagrams, airport diagrams showing kind of an upside down wedding cake on top of the airport, those are the imaginary Part 77 imaginary airspace surfaces that protect the airspace around the airport. Other kinds of airspaces that it evaluates or describes rather are TERPS surfaces for terminal instrument procedures on arrival into airports, as well as one engine and operative surfaces for departures out of airports. Also, again, it evaluates noise and goes into wildlife hazards, electrical interference, and other kinds of hazards to aircraft in flight. One thing I wanted to note is there was a footnote on page 2.2 that said the FAA is conducting research on updating the current significance threshold, as well as evaluating sleep disturbance and other types of analyses affected by noise. So that is in process at the FAA. So overall, it's really just a compendium of guidance from different federal, state sources of information, regulations, as well as guidance like the California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook, which is put out by Caltrans for use in development of airport land use compatibility plans. and other kinds of documents. And it just puts them all together in one circular, advisory circular, and explains them. And it's basically a toolbox, essentially. So it's out for public comment. And again, as Mary Lynn had stated, the close of the comment period is August 6th. So we would need any, if we wanted to, if the roundtable would want to draft a comment letter, we would need input by the 4th of August.
So Chris, I noticed in reading some of the pages, because it's fascinating reading, and there's even some lovely graphics, that in 2.3.1.3, there is discussion of it within it, disclosing noise impacts and discouraging residential development within 65 dB DNL noise contour. And again, on page 11, there's discussion of DNL 60, 65 dB. Is this something that I felt this was worthwhile to bring this to us so that we do not let out a document that is used for perpetuity, as far as we know, contain something that has that DNL 60, 65 dB in it. So how can we frame a letter that indicates that, given our past action, our just most recent action, that we don't like seeing this thing in documents, especially when it's time to reconsider? And also based on what you just said, which I think is worthwhile hearing again about the FAA considering something else.
Based as I interpret it, based upon the NES, they are evaluating. Well, they've been in the process for a long time of evaluating 65 dB and DNL as the proper metric, and that is a proper threshold. So it's an ongoing process.
So,
and so that's all the footnote was really pertaining to.
So we've got the NES, we're aware of that. So what is the recommended action here today that we can look at and move forward with as a roundtable?
Complete further review of the advisory circular, take comments from the roundtable after they've had an opportunity to look at the advisory circular, and then draft a comment letter to be submitted by August 6th.
Well, I think it was possibly 200 and some odd pages. I'm not sure.
It's about 135 pages. It's not a very long document.
Okay, well, unfortunately, my paging came out longer. So I think it's important here that, given its broad extent, and Glenn can speak to that because he is on the San Jose land use, airport land use group, that what we are looking for here is a reaction from our roundtable saying, we're not happy with seeing the continuation of 65 as the standard. Correct?
I wouldn't rely upon 65. This isn't going to provide you with any thresholds. It acknowledges that 65 is the current threshold, often is the current threshold. For local jurisdictions, it's up to local jurisdictions to determine what noise level is appropriate for residential development. The FAA has no say in that. It's just 65 has been the threshold of significance for Part 150 and environmental purposes for so long. That a lot of jurisdictions just default to that. It's also, for California airport noise standards, is also the significance threshold under California airport noise standards as well.
Okay.
So what you could say in lieu of that would be, instead of using 65, you could say, tailor it to acknowledge that jurisdictions it's within their authority, within their jurisdiction, to make those kinds of determinations for the thresholds. Maybe using 65 as an example may not be the best choice.
Okay. Glenn?
Yeah, I just want to say, so I sit on the Santa Clara County Airport Land Use Commission, and I know we have one of the members of the public sits on it as an alternate to that as well. I'm really just trying to understand what we're trying to do. The Airport Land Use Commission is already doing this stuff. We've produced the CLUPs, which apply to all the airports today. And it was unclear to me in trying to review this document, how much of this circular that's going out is different language than what has already been told to the various airport land use commissions. And if it's not if this circular doesn't say anything different than what the prior circulars say, we're not going to be going and changing the CLUPs that apply to all the different airports that are out here. So I'm really just trying to understand, yeah, the FAA is putting this out, and I'm sorry, I'm just at the so what point right now.
So CLUPs, or Airport Land Use Compatibility Plans, prepared in the state of California are not prepared using this guidance. This guidance does refer to the California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook produced by Caltrans, because California is a leader in the development of compatible land use planning for airports.
So you just
this is a
reinforced my point.
nationwide, yeah, this is nationwide advisory circular. All it's doing is providing a compendium of different referential sources that basically.
And again, I don't know how it's different than what they published before, because that's actually the important part. And as it just relates to what we're trying to accomplish, I'm still at the why do I care? And why do we even think we need to write a letter? I'm at that point. I forget what we might say. I'm not sure why we need to say something about a document that's in, unless we're just, the letter says here, we support all of our, roundtables around the country and whatever they might say, but it's really not that particularly relevant to what's happening to the airports here in California. So again, I'm just at the, what's the relevance here?
Chris, can we make a difference? Is what I think he's saying.
Well, yeah, all contributions are helpful, I think, but it's up to you if you want to write a comment letter.
Okay, Kathy?
Thank you, Chair. Chris, is this a document that like local municipalities would be responding to as stakeholder or potential stakeholders? Would they be taking a position on this document or submitting recommendations or?
Possibly.
I would
guidance.
suggest, if I can just say, I would suggest that our local jurisdictions should be responding to what the CLUPs say, because that's what's relevant to us. You can get whatever you want changed in this document. It's not the document that the CLUP is based on, which is what all the airports are and the local jurisdictions are having to use for airport land use.
And just to clarify, CLUPs, LUCPs that Glenn is talking about are documents particular to the state of California, and this is advisory guidance for the entire country. Not every state has requirements for the preparation of airport land use compatibility plans like the state of California does, and those that do, they usually don't take them to the level that we do in California. So the advisory circular does refer to the California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook and the guidance in there, but only as an example that could be of some interest or use to jurisdictions elsewhere. This guidance is, I think, particularly important to local jurisdictions when they're doing their land use planning, because it does provide guidance on where it might be appropriate to plan for residential or other noise sensitive land uses relative to the airports. But also I think it helps illustrate and explain why it's important to protect areas around airports from incompatible land uses, not just to protect people and property, but also the airports themselves and the continued operation of the airports.
Thank you for that, Chris. And I was going to say, I know we have a staff person who's an attendee, and I was just going to ask her if she could just follow up on my behalf with our staff and see if the city of Santa Clara is responding to this document. So thank you for that input.
Okay, are there any questions, more questions of staff at this time? I see none, but I'm going to ask if there's anyone. Oops, I do. Sorry, there you are, Allison. I see you now.
Sorry, slow to get to the hand raise. You know, the one thing that I took away from reading all this was that wildlife is cited as a hazard, and it just throughout the document. And of course, I think most of us see wildlife as more than just a hazard. I know that it is with respect to airports, but I was wondering if there were any comments on that, and in general, whether more explicitly, I know community groups and nonprofits were cited as possible stakeholders or as stakeholders, but environmental groups specifically, that was, as someone rather new to this whole process, that was the thing that kind of jumped out at me as wildlife only talked about as a hazard and not, you know, protections for wildlife as a land use. So I'd love to hear comments on that.
From an aviation perspective, wildlife tends to be looked at as a hazard. Think of geese being sucked into jet engines. And so the guidance provided by the FAA pertaining to wildlife hazard is really focused on attractants and developing land uses that avoid attractants to wildlife hazards. So for example, you don't want to have a large pond that would attract a flock of Canada geese at the end of a runway, because that would increase the likelihood of geese being sucked into a jet engine and there being an aircraft accident.
Well, I can appreciate our concern for wildlife, and I share it in some instances. This is not our mission, and it's not what we as a roundtable address. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and I agree with you, Allison. It's fascinating reading, but I think we brought this item focusing on the 65 DNL, and I'm hoping that we can stay focused on that topic, not to poo-poo any of our wildlife, but yes, they can be a hazard, and I'll agree with that. I'm going to open this up to public comment at this time. I see a hand raised by Marie Jo.
Thank you. So I agree with Glenn that it's hard to comment on this circular when you don't know the differences between the 1987 document and the proposed circular. It would have been great if the FAA had highlighted their proposed changes. However, there is a major glaring omission. The proposed guidelines have been drafted without any consideration of the NES results. The FAA continues to operate as if the NES results do not exist. So if you do send a letter, please emphasize that the FAA must update the proposed draft to reflect the NES results. There is no urgency in updating a document that is almost 25 years old. If it takes the FAA another year or two to create another draft, so be it. The circular is a great opportunity for the FAA to demonstrate that they are willing to take actions based on the NES results. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie Jo. I appreciate it. I think you've gotten exactly to the heart of the matter. I don't see any other speakers' hands raised. I do not see any more, so I'm going to close public hearing and ask if there's a motion or further discussion. I don't see any hands raised for that. I think, oh, Kathy, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I was going to go ahead and just make the motion to authorize the chairperson with full SCSC Roundtable approval to prepare. Oh, no, we're not going to send a letter, right? Yes.
No, we were going to make comments that would be in a letter.
Okay, I apologize. Okay, to prepare and send a comment letter to the FAA based on feedback from the SCSC Roundtable regarding the draft advisory circular prior to the August 6, 2021 comment period deadline.
And I see a second. I need clarification. Is that to contain what we just heard from our public about how the FAA must update the proposed draft?
And yes, to contain information regarding that received from the public about the FAA update.
Okay. And there was a second from Stan?
Yes.
Real quick. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead, unless there's any further discussion, with roll call. Do I have a hand up? Oh, Kathy, it's your hand. Okay. Anyone else that wants to say anything? No. All right. Thank you. Cupertino.
Yes.
Los Altos.
Yes.
Los Altos Hills.
Yes.
Mountain View.
Yes.
Palo Alto. Greer, nice to see you here.
Yes, thanks. Same. Good being here. And yes.
Thank you. Santa Clara, Kathy.
Yes.
Saratoga. Sorry, Glenn. Go ahead. You go first.
No.
Okay. And Maryland, yes. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5, unless there's any reason to take a quick break.
Chair, just a quick question. Do we need to note the switch between Lydia and Mr. Stone for the minutes?
That's what I'm hoping I did with that. Good
Okay.
point, yes. I think he came in on this item. I all of a sudden saw his face. So I didn't have a chance.
Yeah, I came in during item 4.
Yeah. Okay. And hopefully ESA saw that too. There may have been some prompting and some exiting by Lydia that they were aware of. So thank you, Anita. All right, item number 5. This is an ad hoc committee report by me. It's meant to update our ad hoc committee's ongoing discussions with the Cities Association. I hope this will be brief. I would like to thank Glenn and Kathy for staying with me on the ad hoc throughout all of this. The SCSC Roundtable has continued to meet with the 2 representatives from Cities Association. I may slip back and forth between Cities and CASI. I understand they're the same entity. As a result of these meetings, the Roundtable has been given the go-ahead to proceed with assigning our legal counsel to create a new memorandum of understanding based on the existing one, and including new criteria for remaining with CASI as our fiscal agent. These criteria are based on the document Principles for SCSC Roundtable Relationship with Cities Association, Santa Clara County, CASI, drafted by ad hoc members Glenn, Kathy, and me. And on material referenced as a matrix, which was presented to the Roundtable ad hoc by CASI ad hoc members, Chappie Jones and Larry Klein. The MOU is expected to be completed in time for presentation to the CASI Executive Board at their August 6th meeting. That's a week from tomorrow. Emphasis in the MOU is on documenting the roles and responsibilities of the 2 entities. A brief summary. The Roundtable will contract for a program coordinator. This will require the development of a scope of services and a new budget line item. The Roundtable will contract for legal counsel, which we have already approved, as we did in the May meeting. And that will be an extended, a larger amount than we had before. The CASI cities will continue as the fiscal agent. We also will end up paying some amount of money to be determined to CASI as the fiscal agent for processing our paperwork. The Roundtable, in discussions with and approval from CASI, will define an appropriate reimbursement schedule for the time that CASI does support the Roundtable for the fiscal agent activities. And that's pretty much it. We are in a go-ahead, but a holding pattern at the same time. Are there any questions from members of the Roundtable? Seeing none, I'll open this up to public comment. I'm not seeing any. Oh, there we are. Rob Holbrook.
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious to know what the process is for moving this forward. Does the MOU need to be approved by the Roundtable, or does it go straight to the cities? And is it what, 2/3 of all the cities? If you could clarify, that would be interesting. Thank you.
I am making a request of our legal counsel, Kirsten Powell, to show it to the ad hoc, and then it will be presented to the Roundtable, the Cities Association Executive Board, and they will comment on it. I'm hoping that we are at a stage now where it can go through that process with discussions going back and forth as to making sure that it fits both of our needs. And then that definitely by October, if not sooner, we will have an MOU up and moving, because then we need to complete the financial arrangements with Cities Association and hire a program coordinator. And I hope that answered your question. I don't see any other questions from attendees. Your other part of your question was what the number of votes needed to approve. Cities Association will run with their own votes, determination majority. I think it's a majority, but it may be a financial, so I don't know for sure. That's to be determined. And I hope that answers anything else. Glenn or Kathy, did you want to say anything more? Because I'm closing public hearing because I don't see anybody else. I saw a no from Kathy.
Yeah, I would just say it's been a very interesting process of what we've gone through to get a fiscal agent and how we've explored other possibilities. And really what the MOU, I think, it comes down to is just clarifying roles and responsibilities and taking things that had been just assumed or not clarified. It's just trying to put it in writing so that everybody clearly knows and there's going to be no issues left or right. I think, to the question before, it's going to have to be approved by Cassie. It'll have to be voted on and approved here by this group of people. But I think you'll find when you're able to read the document that we're not trying to specify anything that's out of line. It's really just trying to take things that may be known or thought of as assumptions or whatever, and just try to be very clear in what roles and responsibilities are, so there's no gray areas for anyone.
Okay, Liang.
So I'm just curious. I think thank you guys for taking the lead, and seems to be a long process. And I'm curious, were there issues of contention between the two bodies? And then how were they resolved? And you come to an understanding. Yeah, this is a great result. Thank you so much for all the work you do.
Thank you, Liang. I believe there was a question as to how we could best define the roles and responsibilities. There had always been a recognition that the executive director of Cities Association was not going to be performing duties for the roundtable once the roundtable was set up. And once we moved into discussing that, we came to realize that we did need to hire. Oh, I just got 3 deer right at my window, a mother and 2 babies. Sorry, a little distracting when they've got their noses up. They're eating my agapanthus. A realization that we needed to hire our own program coordinator so that we could put the responsibility of the work that needed to be done, not on ESA and not on the fiscal agent. And also hire our attorney, and we're very happy that she's here, and just move forward with an understanding of the roles and responsibilities. It also was an opportunity for, I believe, cities to understand exactly, or not exactly, but better what we as an agency do.
I would just add, yeah, there were, things that were unclear. I don't want to say disagreements, but it was really just a clarity thing. And I think once we were able to identify what the questions were and then have a discussion and write down what we meant by it, that I think is what actually sped things along rather well. So the simple thing was, what are the questions? And then being able to get clear answers. I don't think there were lots of disagreements on what we meant by or what was going on. It was just more, it was a clarity of understanding.
Absolutely. So that was just information. So I believe we can move on to the next item, which is a budget summary, and that's mine again. This item is meant to offer the financial status of the roundtable at this time and to elicit input and direction for the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. The fiscal year 21-22 budget will return to the roundtable for its consideration and adoption at the next regular meeting, which is scheduled for October 27th. So I'm not giving you any hard numbers here because we still need to complete the MOU and get more information from Cities Association as to some of the financial standing where we are. There's certain things that are under negotiation at this time too. The roundtable annual revenues consist of membership dues from 9 participating agencies. 8 of you are here today. The 9th one is the county. In fiscal year 2021, the revenues totaled $187,597.78. There were no increases in membership dues for fiscal year 21-22. So revenues are expected to remain the same as they did in the last fiscal year. The major expense in the 2021 budget was the ESA contract, budgeted at $180,000. Due to the suspension of the roundtable at the beginning of the calendar year 2021, budget reserves carryover from the fiscal year 2021 were carried into fiscal year 21-22. There are outstanding invoices awaiting approval. 2 of these invoice items are yet to be negotiated as the roundtable moves forward with discussions with Cassie. So a final determination of our reserve carryover cannot be presented at this time. The ESA contract has been extended to December 30th, 2021. With those available contract reserves from the prior fiscal year, it is currently estimated that the roundtable has funding available for 2 regular roundtable meetings, one being today, and the second one being October 27th, and 1 subcommittee meeting. Looking ahead to the fiscal year 2021-22 budget, there are the following considerations. As required by Cities Association, the roundtable must have legal counsel at roundtable and subcommittee meetings. This will result in increasing annual legal counsel line item budget in the 21-22 budget. Anticipated needs include 4 roundtable meetings, meeting prep, a yet to be determined number of subcommittee meetings, and client communication between the roundtable and Cities Association. At the May 2021 roundtable meeting, the roundtable approved the hiring and scope of work for Kirsten Powell at an hourly rate of $275 an hour. The second consideration is the cost of the amended MOU, which will be discussed in section B of this item. And the third item is, once the amended MOU is approved, additional budget expenses, as I've indicated, will include the costs of the fiscal agent and of a newly hired program coordinator. The cost for the fiscal agent is estimated at $53 an hour. This represents a base rate of pay of $45 an hour with benefits and overhead built in. This is what Cassie has told us that they are expecting. It's been agreed that that will be, not to dismiss it, it will be a filing, a paper shuffling. At this point, every invoice that comes in is approved by the chair and then turned over to Cassie, and Cassie files and makes a report to Cities Association. And then the second part of that additional budget expense, as I have said, is the newly hired program coordinator. The job description for the prospective program coordinator, according to the Fair Labor Standards Act, is currently estimated at between $35 and $45 an hour. Overhead must be factored in, and we'll be considering that as we go forward in trying to hire somebody and setting up the job description, which will be something that I believe our ad hoc will still continue to do. The finalized budget recommendations will be presented at the SCSC Roundtable October meeting. And I think that's all I have to give you today. Are there any questions from the board? I'm not seeing anybody. Thank you. I'm going to open up public comment at this time. I don't see anyone raising their, oh, there's the hand. Jennifer. Okay.
Sorry, I should have mentioned, this is sort of a joint comment, I guess, prior and current. Just want to thank all of you for the work that you do to support this effort with this roundtable. I think it's very important for the region and for continuity. And I really hope that, especially now that the FAA is reviewing so many different things, that your input can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that, as we all do. Okay. I see Robert Holbrook has his hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, I regretted that I didn't thank you for your work to bring us to this point. I know it's been a lot to get to here from where we were in January, and it's great. So I appreciate that. I just also like to add, relative to my previous remark, I looked at the MOU, and it appears that a 2/3 majority of the roundtable has to vote in favor of the change to the MOU, and then 2/3 of the member organization cities need to vote for it too in order for it to take effect. Thank you.
Thank you. You always are great for doing your homework, and we benefit from that. Thank you, Rob. Okay, once Rob's hand goes down, I don't see any more. That seems to be it. Or is there any discussion from the members of the roundtable? Otherwise, this is just an information item in this section. We'll now move on to 6B, which is under budget summary, to request approval for the expenditure of $3,000 to produce that MOU for the cost of the legal counsel, Kirsten Powell, to prepare an amended memorandum of understanding between the SCSC Roundtable and the Cities Association. Funding of this expenditure will come from the SCSC reserves account. And what I didn't say in the budget summary is that we do have enough money there. I see Anita Enander's hand raised.
I'd like to move this item, Madam Chair, for discussion or for approval. I don't know if we need to have additional public input. And if my motion's premature, then I'll hold it until it's ready.
Thank you. Just so that we stay on target, I am going to open it up because it is a separate item for public comment. Okay. I'm hoping that if they are going to comment, that they're going to be in the same line as what we heard before. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So Anita, I'll call back on you.
Okay, then I will put on the floor a motion to approve the $3,000 expenditure for legal counsel to prepare the memorandum of understanding between the SCSC Roundtable and the Cities Association of Santa Clara County.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, go ahead.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, to get my list of everybody. We have the motion as stated. I think ESA, Evan, it's clear. Phoebe, we've got it good? Okay, good. Cupertino, Liang.
Yes.
Los Altos, Anita.
Yes.
Los Altos Hills, Stan.
Yes.
Mountain View, Allison.
Yes.
Thank you. Palo Alto, Greer.
Yes.
Santa Clara, Kathy.
Yes.
Sunnyvale, Glenn.
Yes.
And Saratoga, Mary Lynn, yes. Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to item number 7. Oh boy, it's me again. Hold on, please. Let me get my paperwork here. All right. This is my report that has 2 items. One is the delightful report on having listened to 2 days of the FAA's briefing. So on July 20th and 21st, the FAA held public briefings on the Northern California airspace, which included an overview of airspace operations and updates on several NorCal procedures. These included Candlestick, Night Hush, Bodega, Pirate, Bricks, Surfer Big Sur, and Windsor. The presentations were followed by a period for questions and answers. The briefing's outcome resulted in disappointment and frustration on many levels. It is too soon for the roundtable to comment further on potential action. Time to process the material presented at these briefings is necessary to assess future steps. Raquel Gervin did during the briefings on both days indicate that the FAA is willing to continue the discussions with the roundtables. This will be dependent on any future recommendations coming out of the roundtables being flexible or on technology changing and always grounded in safety. But before we can do that, we'll have to get more facts from the FAA, more details. To that end, our SCSCRoundtable.org website contains workshop supplemental materials that include the workshop handout, the information poster boards, and information on the FAA initiative updates on phase 2, which include July 17, November 17, April 18, April 19, and July 19. That's 2019. Additionally, on Friday, July 23rd, the congressional offices of Representatives Eshoo, Spear, and Panetta responded to the FAA decision not to adopt Select Committee recommendations on aircraft noise. Their joint statement reads, "On behalf of so many of our constituents, we are extremely disappointed with the Federal Aviation Administration's decision not to adopt Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals recommendations to create a new next-gen procedure for arrivals into SFO from the South using the Big Sur arrival flight path. The Select Committee worked tirelessly for 9 months from May 25th to November 17th, 2016. And held 13 public meetings throughout our 3 congressional districts with over 3,500 constituents participating in the meetings to develop the Surfer Big Sur consensus recommendations, which we transmitted to the FAA on December 2nd, 2016. It has taken the FAA 55 months to respond in full to the recommendations. There is no excuse for why it has taken this long, despite our best efforts to engage directly with multiple FAA administrators spanning 3 administrations." The letter goes on, the release goes on to say, "We thank our constituents who engaged in this long and arduous process, and we are grateful to the local governments who invested in the regional airport roundtables that made these workshops possible. We also appreciate the commitment made by the FAA at the workshops to remain engaged with the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and SFO roundtables. Our constituents' participation brought the FAA to the table for a dialogue on airplane noise reduction, and we are committed to supporting their continuing efforts. I repeat, our representatives state they are willing to continue supporting continuing efforts. As I stated earlier, it is too soon to comment or take definitive action. We need to get more information from the FAA. I give you my promise as long as I sit on this committee. That's me. This is not the roundtable, not the congressional saying this. I give you my promise that I will request specific details from the FAA. So with congressional help, we, the SCSC Roundtable, can proceed with pursuing further more productive action on which everyone can agree. Where the congressionals only mentioned Surfer Big Sur, I know that there are members of our constituency that are also concerned about Pirate. I have given you my statement. Now I want one more thing to say, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. It has nothing to do with the FAA briefing. We are coming up shortly with the elections, the next item. And at this time, it also is premature to make any announcements about setting up the subcommittees. Our bylaws say that it's by the chair's appointment of members and chairs to the subcommittees, and that needs to have more time as we work through everything that we're working through right now. So are there any questions from the roundtable members at this point? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, I will move on to attendees. I see Marie-Jo Fremont's hand raised. We'll open public comment.
Thank you. In their workshops and almost 5 years after the Select Committee recommendations, the FAA announced they couldn't do the Big Sur overlay. They claimed safety was an issue and they couldn't meet the 9 criteria. Their story does not add up. In May 2018, the FAA knew they couldn't do the Big Sur overlay. That's why they designed in June 2019 a new surfer replacement which also did not meet the 9 criteria. So why wait 3 years to tell us they couldn't do the Big Sur overlay? Why did the FAA proceed after June 19 with an environmental assessment on a new surfer replacement, including seeking input on historical properties, produce a video in September 2019 on this new surfer, and then create another video for the workshops last week to explain that they will not implement the recommended Big Sur overlay? The story does not add up, and it erodes the trust between the public and the FAA. Last week's surprise proves again that the FAA community engagement process does not work. We need fundamental changes, including active and good faith collaboration on the FAA's part. We need to restore trust in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, okay. Next is Darlene Yapley, then Jennifer, then Cheryl Poland.
I'd like to add my thanks to the Roundtable for all the work you do to support us, your residents. As mentioned by Marie Jo, we need serious changes to the FAA's community engagement process. There are 4 must-haves based on last week's workshop. Number 1, noise abatement must be the objective after safety. Number 2, true community representation. Today, there is no ability to influence because there is no proactive engagement or advocacy in the design process for the community needs. A technical consultant must be part of the FAA project team and design team to advocate for the community. Airport or airline representatives cannot be our advocates because they have conflicts of interest. Number 3, active and good faith FAA collaboration to develop solutions based on community noise abatement objectives and design principles. Number 4, transparency and timeliness, which means the FAA discloses the applicable safety and design criteria and whether waivers can be requested. The community receives timely progress updates, unlike what we experienced with Surfer, and is able to review alternative solutions and provide input before decisions are made. I urge the Roundtable to discuss the lessons learned from the 5-year Surfer experience and make a formal request to the FAA for true community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Jennifer?
Yes, thank you. I agree with the previous 2 speakers for fundamental change and for all of the suggestions. I would add that the experience of all the individuals that are providing input is really important and should be taken seriously. Can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
And I want to point out the fact that the FAA continues to speak with the navigation boards and not about noise. And the boards that they presented are navigation charts, and the IFP Gateway reports that are currently presented by the SCSC Roundtable. For lack of a better way to describe it, it's the FAA talking to itself. It's a website which is for operators, for users of the airspace system. And they're saying, oh, we're applying for this procedure. And they go, oh, okay, and here you can do it. And here's a CADX, and we're out of that conversation. As you have witnessed, I have been trying to get information. Well, what did you use? Did you use a CADX? Did you do this? What did you do? It's horrible. So they're talking to themselves. They're using navigation charts. So is it a surprise that we're disconnected and that there's no communication? And it's not like we haven't provided feedback to the FAA before on community involvement. We have been doing it for years, and I can provide the documentation. But this intransigence, or whatever the term is, to really just not listen. In terms of process issues, we're not even talking about flight paths. We're talking about process. So at least that, I think you can make a difference in really being able to take these suggestions that were presented forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I have to wait till the screen clears. And Cheryl Poland.
Hi, this is Cheryl Poland, and I just wanted to make a quick comment about the FAA workshop. I wanted to start off by just reading a quick sentence that has appeared in every piece of correspondence that Raquel Gervin has written regarding the new SURFR procedure. Quote, if and when the FAA determines the new procedure meets safety criteria and is operationally feasible, the FAA will consult with elected representatives and airport roundtables about next steps. That didn't happen. The FAA effectively cut out the roundtables, the reps, and the community with regard to the new procedure and their decision-making process. Instead, they created a self-serving infomercial as cover and essentially gave all of us the finger, the collective all of us, the community, the roundtables, our reps, and all of the elected officials that have worked on this issue for the past 6 years. So I would ask our reps and the roundtable to take the FAA to task for their bad faith in this matter. They need to live up to their commitments. They need to consult with our roundtables and our elected representatives regarding the new SURFR procedure, and they need to do it now, not 6 months from now, not a year from now. Thank you, and thank all of you for your service on the roundtable.
Thank you, Cheryl. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to speak at this time? Otherwise, I'll be closing the public comment time. I see Debbie Haycom.
Hi, my name is Debbie Hakeem. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for all the hard work they've been doing. I greatly appreciate it. But the thing, again, as everyone else has been bringing up, you know, noise is a huge factor. I'm impacted by the arrivals to San Francisco by the SURFR pass. And in fact, our family is actually experiencing now health issues because of, number one, we don't even sleep that well at night because of planes waking us up at night. And I, again, just want some resolution to find out how can I deal with this noise so I can get back to, you know, feeling good and healthy and getting a good night's sleep again. Anything that can be done would be greatly appreciated at this time. Thank you.
I completely understand. Thank you for speaking. We're running the clock down here. And is there anyone else that would like to speak from the public? Seeing no one. This item was information only. Is there any comment that the roundtable members would like to make before we move on to the election, item number 8? Glenn, and then Kathy.
Yeah, so I appreciate everything the public just said, and I appreciate where the FAA was, and I appreciate the congressional comments that happened here. And to me, what I take away from this is I'm going to get back on my horse of that we as a roundtable need to be focused. You know, given the limited amount of time of what we can do and how we can operate, we do much better when we are able to focus on items. And I'll just use an example that way back when, you know, when we first started, we had talked about that the roundtable here was going to be able to be a clearinghouse of the statuses that came out from the FAA about the select committee, because the congressional offices weren't able to figure out from the statuses of what went on. And over the course of time, and because we've been asked to deal with so many different items, and because of what's happened the last, you know, greater than 6 months of us not being able to meet and everything else, that's just one of those things that we wanted to do, and it got away from us because we were not able to be focused. And I'm not criticizing anybody. If anybody, we should be criticizing ourselves for letting that happen. But I just say that as, and when we go forward, and as we're going to get the MOU done, and we're actually going to, you know, have a chance to have a restart button here on our roundtable as we get things worked out with Cassie again and stuff, I would just encourage us to be focused, and we need to take a few items and make sure we're able to go after them and be able to stay and follow through with them. And one of the things we had lots of comments with is about how the FAA communicates and what goes on with, you know, their community round people and what they do or don't do and all those things. And so I'm just going to be back on my horse that I think we're going to be more effective as a roundtable. And we've shown that our roundtable versus all the other roundtables around the country can be more effective if we take a little bit more of a narrow and focused approach and not try and necessarily just redo what everybody else is doing that isn't being effective. So, so that's my thing. And then to the one of the comments that a member of the public said, to take the FAA to task, that's not our job. They don't work for me. This is a whole problem with the roundtables and our cities have, that the FAA doesn't report to this. If you want to have somebody take the FAA to task, then I would encourage you to write specific letters to your Congress members to go ahead and do that, because the FAA works for Congress, Congress works for you, but we're not in that chain of command to be able to try and take and give that kind of commentary to the FAA. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Glenn. Kathy, I see you first and then Anita?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with what Glenn just said, but what I wanted to add was I was glad to be able to participate or listen in on the call last week. But what I took away from it, well, there were two things mostly. Number one, the significance of this roundtable and how important it is to our communities. And over the last 6 months, what we have not been able to do as representatives for our communities, to be able to hear issues and be able to discuss, to be able to then forward to the FAA or bring to their bring in front of them. So that's one of the takeaways. The other one, I know we have constituents that are impacted by SFO, but a lot are impacted by SJC. And one of the disappointments I had was the fact that SJC wasn't really very well talked about. There were representatives there, but there was no discussion about SJC except for just their takeoff. That was basically it, and how they round up through the sky and to get above the flights. But other than that, there was no discussion about SJC. So that was a disappointment on my part. So that's all I have, and hopefully there'll be further discussions later on.
Thank you, Kathy. Anita?
Thank you, Chair. I also want to echo what my colleagues have said in appreciation for the public who repeatedly, consistently, diligently, with great energy and an incredible amount of effort, continue to come to us with great information, suggestions, urging us to do the right things for our community. And so we really appreciate that you do that, as well as that you understand how little we were able to affect what happened last week in the presentations. Picking up on what my colleague, Mr. Hendricks, said, and also my colleague from Santa Clara, Ms. Watanabe, when we get to where we can do a reset, when we have a budget, we have an MOU, I agree that we need to focus, but we need to focus on where we can really be productive. I don't think any one of us wants to hit our heads against a brick wall. We do plenty of that, and we don't want to do any more of that. And so I think it's going to be incredibly important that we work with our congressional representatives. I continue to appreciate, especially that Mr. Pike is here so consistently, that we can always count on you being here. I hope that our other congressional people will also engage with us on what can we most productively do, because focus has to be focused with some chance of success. And otherwise we can all just, go home. So let's figure out where we can have a chance of success, and then focus laser-like on that with community input, with working with our congressionals to accomplish the best we can do for our population, for all the people that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. And I agree with all that everyone has said, but I do want to point out that Eric Henshaw is here from a Representative Eshu's office. So
my apologies.
In the past,
thank you very much.
In the past, when I have had,
since she is my representative, as you know.
And in the past, when I have seen a strange area code, I have come to discover that it's Representative Panetta's office that's on board. I don't think they're here today. but I do appreciate, as all of us do, their attendance and keying into what we need to do. Is there anyone else that wanted to make a final statement? I don't want to belabor the fact. I realize that I may have skipped over a sentence that I think is important. We, as the Roundtable and ESA, were not involved with the FAA's Northern California airspace public meetings. They chose how they were going to be running the venue, and that's how they ran the show. But we still, as a Roundtable, are the designated venue for interaction with the FAA. And so you can certainly, all of us here in the Roundtable and all of the attendees, all of our constituents can still and be most efficient by writing to us as the Roundtable so that we can gather up those letters and send them to the correct FAA office, because that's the last thing we need to do is put it on somebody else's desk and have it go on longer than it needs to, because it's already gone on longer than it needs to. So thank you all for participating in that part. It's always good to hear that we do believe that we're here for a good purpose and that we do want to move forward and that we appreciate each other always. So it's now item number 8, the SCSC Roundtable elections. I turn this over to our facilitator, Evan Wasserman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bernald. This item will be a vote to elect the SCSC Roundtable chairperson and vice chairperson, but it's, as noted on the agenda, this will be just for the remainder of the 2021 term. So it will only be serving until January 2022. And this is to realign with the election schedule that's outlined in the bylaws. So to go through the process and how we've done it in the past, there's going to be 2 elections, one for the chairperson and one for the vice chairperson. For each, there's going to be a call for nominations from the floor. Then a motion needs to be made, and statements will be provided by the nominees if they wish to do so. And then discussion by members, followed by public comment, and then we will call for a vote. And so we'll do that for both the chairperson and the vice chairperson. So with that, let's get started. Is there a call for nominations from the floor for the chairperson?
I have my hand raised, Evan.
Yeah, hi, Kathy, go for it.
Okay, thank you, Evan. Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to nominate Mary Lynn Bernald to continue as chair.
Anita, I see your hand raised.
I would second that nomination.
Are there any other nominations? All right.
Come on, folks, bring it on.
Then with that, the motion and a second by Anita, Mary Lynn, would you have a statement that you'd like to give, or?
I will just say thank you for your support.
Right. And if there's any other discussion, feel free to chime in or raise your hand. Otherwise, we can go to public comment. Seeing no hands raised from the attendees, I will call for a vote. And let's start with Allison. And you can just say the yay or nay.
Yes.
Anita.
Yes.
Glenn.
Yes.
Greer.
Yes.
Kathy.
Wholeheartedly, yes.
Liang.
Yes.
Mary Lynn.
Can I abstain? Yes.
And Stan.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you all. I appreciate the vote of support. It's a transitional period, and it wasn't up to me to say whether I wanted it or didn't want it. It's a situation where I do appreciate the support, and I'll do my best to move forward with getting the roundtable on good, strong ground again. And with that said, I would like to nominate. Oh, do you need to call it? The suspense. Evan, you need to call?
Yeah, so it's passed unanimously with Mary Lynn to continue as the chair for the remainder of this term. So now we'll move on to the vice chair and ask for a call for nominations from the floor for vice chair. Mary Lynn?
I would like to nominate Anita Enander.
I'll second that.
Bless you.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, then we can, would you like to give a statement, Anita?
No, I would just be repeating what Mary Lynn said, which is I think what's really important is some continuity as we wind up a transition and hit restart. So thank you.
And if there's no other discussion, we can go to the public for public comment. Seeing no hands raised, then we will call for a vote. Starting from the top, Allison.
Yes.
Anita.
Yes.
Glenn.
Yes.
Greer.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Leanne.
Yes.
Mary Lynn.
Yes.
Stan.
Yes.
And Mr. Preminger, I didn't mention it from the earlier, but Mr. Preminger is not in attendance. So with that, the motion passes, and Anita is now continuing as vice chair. Thank you all.
Great.
And so, as Mary Lynn mentioned, the committees will not be elected at this time. That will be for a future meeting. But take that into consideration and think about which of the committees you would like to be involved with. That's the legislative committee and then the technical working group. So, thank you. And now we can move on to the next item, item 8 or 9, sorry.
Yeah, 9, oral communications.
Oral communications, yeah.
So now is the time for the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to a maximum of 2 minutes or less on the number of speakers. Roundtable members cannot discuss or take action on any matter raised under this agenda item. I see 2 people ready to speak, Robert Holbrook and then Marie-Jo Fremont.
Thank you. I've mentioned this before, and I'd like to sharpen this up into a stronger request of the roundtable. I don't want to be alarmist because I don't know if there's grounds for alarm, but I found some data in the environmental impact report for the expansion of SJC Airport that is concerning. And that is that the number of acres affected on arrivals by the new generation of 737-800 aircraft, the 737-8 MAX, is shown as twice what the exposure is, the number of acres exposed by the existing 737-800 aircraft. And I'm concerned that if these numbers are indeed comparable, that the next generation of airplanes could be affecting twice as big an area over large swaths of our jurisdiction as is currently the case. I can't evaluate this, and I'm hoping that you could ask ESA or perhaps the FAA to evaluate whether these 2 numbers are in fact comparable, so that and whether there is cause for concern. Because if there is, this would be a very big deal and we should know about it. I provided more detail in an email that I sent you on Monday. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, it's all there, along with some other suggestions and a few more comments. But I would hope that this is an action that you could assign to somebody who is in a position to evaluate whether this concern is legitimate or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next speaker is Marie-Jo Fremont.
Thank you. I know you can't take action, but I'll still plug in some things for you. First topic is GBAS. SFO is continuing its work on implementing GBAS. First, the overlay, which will be implemented on December 2nd. And second, their innovative approaches. So the GBAS train is moving fast and the roundtable is not on board. And this roundtable needs to be on board because GBAS will affect our communities. So similar to the San Mateo County communities who have the San Francisco Roundtable involved in GBAS, our communities need to know about what SFO is planning to do. And the roundtable must also take a position on the GBAS innovative approaches. We understand the meeting challenges of the roundtable because of the MOU changes. However, time is of the essence. So the information portion, this could be handled if Palo Alto hosted another community information session, as they did in June 2019 when the roundtable could not meet. The SFO airport is amenable to that, as they have shown on their GBAS presentation slide. On the other hand, the roundtable must review and take a position on the innovative approaches that SFO plans to submit toward the end of the year to the FAA. So please figure out a way for the TWG to meet, to review materials, and to draft a position for the roundtable to review. The second topic is Parrot. There is a response from the FAA, and again, they really didn't answer the question in their latest response, and they don't feel any accountability in implementing something that was never requested, was not supported by SFO and the community, and created more noise. So Parrot is a problem, and the roundtable needs to push on getting Parrot fixed, as the chair said she would about 2 years ago. Parrot is noisy, and at night, it's all the Hawaii flights going over Palo Alto at 4 a.m. every morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Jo. Ooh. Am I going to? Okay, good. I'm not sounding like Star Wars person here. Jennifer, please go on.
Thank you. You are CEQA experts, some of you might be, and it has some relationship to NEPA, but my understanding is that it's not really nice to segment a project into two parts in order to avoid disclosures or information to the public. You know, so by segmenting GBAS, the FAA is right now saying, we're going to do these overlays and we're going to talk to you about the innovative. And I was a little concerned that President from SFO called them esoteric ideas for mitigations. That doesn't make any sense to me. There's no rush to do GBAS for any commercial purposes. And if it is intended to reduce noise, I strongly urge you to address the segmentation of this project so that the noise reducing procedures are treated together with the initial output of these procedures. And at the very minimum, to secure a toll on the statute of limitations or something in order for this project to be looked at as a whole. And there are many other metrics that we need to understand about noise. And I really appreciated Robert Holbrook's comment. You know, research is going on the basis of the 65 DNL. So we really have to test all of these ways that noise is happening and to get away from this idea that just a quieter plane is going to make a difference. Well, we don't even know what quiet means. Again, I stress that we need to talk about noise and not about, you know, the right and left turns in the air, because that's not the whole picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. I see Debbie's hand again. I'm going to try to say, is Hakeem? Please let me know.
Yes, Hakeem, that's
Good,
correct.
good, thank you. Please go ahead.
Again, I'm just talking, just like everybody else, noise is a huge issue. And I understand from the FAA workshop that San Jose Mineta Airport has a curfew of no flyovers between 11:30 and 6:30 p.m. And I'm impacted by the surfer route again. I was wondering, is there any way that we could request a type of curfew at night so we can get some sleep? I mean, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. I don't know what it is, but a curfew, I think, would greatly help us get some sleep at night. And I know I'm not the only one having issues with sleep and health issues from that. And I just don't know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. That's the last person who has raised their hand. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this time? I do need to remind you that this is a time where roundtable members do not discuss or take action on any matter raised under this agenda item, although we probably feel as many of you speaking do. So I'm going to close public hearing, public comment, excuse me, that was a throwback from years ago, and ask if there's any, this is public comment, so there's no time for discussion. And then that means we can now move on to potential topics for future SCSC Roundtable consideration. This is from all of you Roundtable members. This is information only. Yes, Greer. And then Kathy, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for your patience. Sorry I was late today, but thanks to Councilmember Koo for stepping in to cover for me. My first one is just kind of regarding GBAS, and SFO has offered, and one of the public commenters just to address this, SFO has offered to participate in an additional GBAS engagement meeting with our local communities, and they've offered that either through this roundtable's technical working group or through the city of Palo Alto, as we did last month. So I have a question. I would imagine the technical working group maybe can answer this. Does the technical working group plan to meet in the near future to discuss and review GBAS? And if no, Palo Alto would be happy to be able to host another GBAS informational session.
Go ahead, Anita.
Given the timing and other constraints on what's happening with the roundtable, including the budget situation and the availability of staff and so on, I think we would be well served to accept Palo Alto's generous offer to do this, and with our great thanks and the thanks of all of our community.
Okay, wonderful. Then I'll work with our city staff and SFO and Councilmember Koo as well to arrange that. And then just kind of as a follow-up question, and we all know information sessions are no substitute for formally informing SFO on this roundtable's position on GBAS's innovative approaches. And I understand GBAS is listed in our work plan. And so I'm just curious how this roundtable plans to communicate our positions on GBAS to SFO. And if there is no plan, I think that'd be something that'd be good for a future agenda item.
Anita, would you like to respond to your experience on technical working group regarding GBAS?
Only that in what we've looked at, or what I've looked at with it, early on, it wasn't terribly clear what the impacts were going to be, and we weren't getting good information, or what I would consider to be actionable information on what the impacts would be. Things have developed a little bit more now. So the way the technical working group has to operate is that either we are working on things that are in our plan, but we are directed specifically by the whole roundtable to take up an item. So if we were to be directed to do something about GBAS, then we would need to meet and do whatever we're tasked to do. And right now, at least based on what I heard today, The budget situation, the MOSU situation is still very uncertain. So I don't know when we'll be in a position. I think the chair would be in a better position to say whether or not there's any hope of, or at what point the roundtable might task the technical working group, and whether GBAS would be the number one thing we should tackle in the event that we could only meet once between now and December, or if there's only one subcommittee, which is what I heard, one subcommittee meeting in the budget for the next 6 months. It's not clear to me if technical working group takes priority over what Ledge might be doing. Ledge might be the higher priority. So that all has to get worked through in terms of how we're tasking technical working groups. Sorry to blather on. I realize if I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry, Mr. Stone. I didn't know if you knew that stuff.
No, that being new, that was very, very helpful information. So I appreciate that, Anita. And I understand there's a lot of complexities to this. I think GBAS is a really critical issue, and one that hopefully we can communicate that to SFO. But I understand those complications. So with that understanding, so think something to consider further discussing in the future as a full body. And then just finally, I would just want to kind of second the public comment made by Ms. Yapley earlier regarding the need to really learn the lessons from the last 5 years. I think it's really important for us to collaborate effectively with the FAA in the future. And if we're going to really take advantage of some of those lessons that we learned, otherwise I fear another 5 years is going to go by without any real progress, and we're just going to be kind of stuck in this Groundhog Day scenario with the FAA. So I think it would be prudent to maybe add an agenda item to a future meeting to really kind of discuss that issue further.
Lessons learned for clarity, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Do maybe like a
all right.
post-mortem on it. Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
So, thank you. I appreciate it, Greer. I didn't see whether Kathy or Glenn's hand went up. I know Glenn has some time constraints. So, you're saying Kathy. Okay, good. Kathy, please go ahead.
All right. Okay, thank you, Chair. And I just want to echo what Commissioner Greer just talked about. I was going to bring up GBAS as well, because I was very fortunate to be on that call as well, and to hear, and it was really informative, and I really appreciate the City of Palo Alto putting it together and in making sure we were invited, if the roundtable was invited. One question I did submit that night and I never got an answer to, but was whether or not SJC would potentially be a candidate to implementing GBAS. And I don't know if that's something that if we do take on GBAS, that we can look at San Jose possibly being affected by it as well. My other ad was going to be what Mr. Holbrook just talked about, again, because it has to do with SJC, is regarding the EIR and the aircraft that he mentioned having an impact on the communities as I think he said the 747-800s or the 787-800s, and their impact on landing and impacts on the community. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Glenn.
Yeah, I'd like to see us have a discussion about SJC, specifically South Flow again. We haven't talked about it in, I'm guessing, 24 plus months. And I would also like to, as part of that discussion, I've had this idea for a long time of the ability to do a level of distribution that does not move noise to other communities. And I'd really like to be able to go back and revisit that, because we've never been able to have that honest discussion yet.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to raise future topics for consideration? I don't see anyone. Then I want to thank each and every one of you for your active participation and interest in the roundtable. On that positive note, we can actually move to item number 11, adjournment. First time in our history of meeting, concluding the meeting prior to 4 p.m., which is something to be celebrated tremendously. I see a broad smile on Evan's face, yes. And Chris's too. So thank you all again for attending and for participating and for caring so much. We'll see you all, if not in person someplace, October 27th at the next roundtable meeting. Real good. Thank you. Bye.